Curious Lloyd.
In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death. Although, for some people, it became almost impossible for them to die. So in this video, I shall speak about these 5 people who have amazingly cheated death in bizarre ways. Peter Fuchsen dug his way out of an icy grave using his own frozen feces. In 1906, at the age of 20, Peter Fuchsen dropped out of medical school and set off to explore Greenland by dog and sled. But that's where he met his first wife, who was also an Inuit woman. They also had one daughter and one son. But I'll try and leave you pronounce them names for yourself, because I will save myself from humiliation by trying to pronounce them. So try and give it a go and pronounce them, and let me know how you get on in the comments. You could say the alphabet rightly feared Peter Fuchsen, but that out of the way. What came to be known as the Thule expeditions, Peter found himself buried alive, waiting out a blizzard, with probably the grossest ever successful conclusion ever. Peter took some of his own feces into his hand, shaped his feces into a chisel, waited for it to freeze rock solid, and then chipped his way to freedom. But unfortunately, feces chiseling is grueling work, and by the time he crawled back into camp hours later, his left foot was severely frostbitten. But without any anaesthetic whatsoever, he performed a self-amputation on his gangrenous foot. But when the Nazis came knocking in during World War II, Peter returned home and joined the Danish resistance movement. After aiding countless refugees from the Reich, Peter was captured and sentenced to death. But of course, he escaped and fled to Sweden, because if Mother Nature herself couldn't murder him, what chance did the Nazis have? Jack Lucas jumped on a grenade and skydived with a failed parachute. 14-year-old Jacqueline Lucas was big for his age, but rather squandered his gifts playing a sport or buying beer for his friends. Lucas instead forged his mother's signature on a recruitment form and went to fight with the Marines in World War II. While trenched on the shores of Iwo Jima, 2 grenades threatened to take out Lucas and his squad mates. But here's what happened next. In Lucas's own words, "I hollered to my pals to get out and did a Superman dive at the grenades. I wasn't a Superman after I got hit. I let out one hell of a scream when that thing went off." Lucas's bravery earned him more than 250 pieces of shrapnel in his body and every major organ, including 6 pieces in his brain and 2 in his heart. He returned home at 17 years old, not even old enough to technically enlist today, where he became the youngest Marine to ever be awarded the Medal of Honor. Lucas clearly wasn't afraid of much. In fact, there was only one thing that got to him, and that was heights. But that was still one thing too many for Lucas, so he set out to conquer his phobia by joining the army legally, but this time as a paratrooper. On one training jump, both Lucas's main backup parachutes malfunctioned successively, because nothing helps you overcome a fear like experiencing the absolute maximum that fear can offer. But according to witnesses, he was the last one out of the aeroplane and the first one on the ground. But he survived, of course, by rolling just as he hit, because Jack Lucas was the living embodiment of action movie physics. A arrow and point-blank bullets couldn't stop Sam Houston. In 1809, Sam Houston ran away from his Virginia home at the age of 16, where he soon joined up to the Cherokee Nation. When the War of 1812 began, 19-year-old Houston joined up to fight with General Andrew Jackson's army. While facing off against another tribe of the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, Houston watched a fellow soldier charge over the enemy an earth log barricade, only to get immediately perforated. But that was the first man to charge. Sam Houston was the second. The enemy rewarded his sizable bravery by shooting him with a sizable barbed arrow into the groin. But rather than quitting war and going home forever after that happening, Houston merely turned to his nearest fellow soldier and asked him to pull it out. When the soldier suggested that maybe he should find a medic because he had an arrow to the groin, Houston pulled his sword on him and demanded that he was to remove it, so Houston could launch straight back into the fight. He was rewarded for his renewed bravery by being shot 3 more times and collapsing onto the battlefield, where he was then left for dead overnight. After being discovered still breathing the next morning, he was dragged 60 miles on a litter to a fort, where he had once again been left for dead. But of course, Houston survived yet again and was left to start a prolific political career. On April the 13th, 1832, he bumped into Ohio Congressman William Stanbury on the streets of Washington. Stanbury had recently accused Houston of defrauding the Cherokee while serving as the governor of Tennessee, a fact that did not sit well with a man who had once married into the tribe. So Houston, predictably, beat Stanbury with his cane. Stanbury pulled a gun and took a point-blank aim at Houston's chest, only to have the weapon misfire and give Houston another reason he was pretty hardcore. Tibor Ruben survived everything war could throw at him. Tibor Ruben was born to a poor Jewish family in Hungary at precisely the worst point in the country's history. At the age of 15, he was sent to the infamous Mauthausen concentration camp, where an SS officer told the new arrivals, "None of you will get out of here alive." But Ruben proceeded to prove that the SS captain was wrong. Unlike 150,000 others at the camp, as well as Ruben's own father, mother, and sister, who never made it out of their respective camps. When American troops liberated Mauthausen, Ruben vowed to show his gratitude to the country that saved him. He did so by volunteering to fight in the Korean War, where he proved himself to be an undeniable, intimidating person again and again. He started by single-handedly holding off a tidal wave of North Korean troops for 24 hours to give the rest of his regiment time to retreat. He followed that up by manning a 30 caliber machine gun after its 3 previous gunners had been shot down, and continued to fire all through the night and into the next day until he ran out of ammo and was captured by the Chinese. His captors offered to release him if he returned to his native Hungary, which is pretty much the best deal a prisoner of war can hope for, yet not much of a hard deal to turn down. Although Ruben refused and instead proceeded to sneak out of the prison camp each night at risk of certain execution to steal food and much needed medical supplies for the comfort of his own fellow prisoners, and he managed to keep it up for 2.5 years. But Ruben's sergeant repeatedly filed recommendations from his superiors that Ruben was to receive a Medal of Honor. It was a slight that would go uncorrected until 2005, when President George Bush retroactively awarded him a long-deserved accolade. Nature failed to the will of Brian Blessed. Brian Blessed is best remembered for his role as Prince Fulton in 1980's Flash Gordon, and my all-time favourite, Blackadder, but not for the fact he became the oldest man to reach an altitude of 28,000 feet without supplemental oxygen, which, until relatively recently, scientists didn't even think was possible for anyone. Though his attempts to summit Everest has been consequently unsuccessful due to the factors beyond his control, such as uncooperative weather. But Brian has conquered peaks like Aconcagua and Kilimanjaro at the age where most people fail to conquer staircases. He is also the oldest man to ever reach the North Magnetic Pole, which he accomplished by walking to the North Magnetic Pole on his own 2 feet. But believe it or not, in one video, he admitted to punching his way through polar bears. If you don't believe me, watch this.
We're in a tent that night, and there were several polar bears around. There's a great big buck of this one. He kept following us, and they had guns, 3 or 4, and people, I don't know, they like to use guns, don't they? It's seductive. And I said, I won't have any of your bastards shooting a bloody polar bear. This is their country. Anyway, one night, this bloody polar bear came along, and he just ripped with its paw, and his whole head came through. And of course, there it was, his face was right in front of me, but bang! Straight on his fucking nose! And he went, and ran off. They will. Lions or anything, gorillas, they hate being hit on the nose. Hit the fucker on the nose. And he ran off and he never came back. So I saved his life. Absolutely true.
That's pretty insane, I must say. But when you consider that the man has survived plane crashes over the remote jungles of Venezuela, and once collapsed on stage whilst performing King Lear when his heart momentarily gave out on him, and only to shake it off and finish the play, I'm definitely going to believe him. But Brian Blessed is 80 years old and still walks among us today, because who's seriously going to tell him to quit?